They celebrated Memorial Day. Then Horror SDRUC Cafe, the flashing red and blue lights reflected off the wet pavement, while half the neighborhood stood outside pretending not to stare. At the center of it all was a folding table covered in paper flags, cold hamburgers, and melted ice. And standing right beside it was Linda Harper, the HOA compliance chair, pointing at my driveway while speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. That man ignored multiple warnings, she told the officer, and now somebody could be dead because of it. The officer didn't answer right away. He just looked toward the back of my property where firefighters were moving carefully along the side fence with flashlights. That was the moment my stomach dropped, because 6 hours earlier this had just been a Memorial Day block party. Families grilling outside, kids riding bikes, neighbors playing old military songs through cheap speakers. Normal, peaceful. Then Linda showed up carrying a clipboard like she was reporting for duty, and somehow by the end of the night, police officers, firefighters, and HOA board members were standing on my lawn while neighbors whispered like they were watching a crime scene unfold. The strange part: none of this started because of violence or a fight or even an argument. It started because Linda became obsessed with controlling one section of my property she believed belonged to the HOA, a section she had complained about for nearly 6 months. At first it was just annoying letters, then threats, then fines, then towing warnings, and finally, Memorial Day itself, the holiday she claimed I was ruining for the neighborhood. Looking back now, I should have realized something was wrong the second she demanded I remove my veteran memorial display from my own front yard. But at the time, I thought she was just another difficult HOA person trying to feel important. I had no idea how far she was willing to push things, or how quickly a neighborhood celebration could turn into panic, especially after someone screamed near the fence line. Even now, I still remember the silence that followed. The music stopped, children froze, and Linda's face changed completely. Not angry anymore, terrified, because the one thing she kept demanding all evening had finally happened. And once the authorities uncovered the truth, the entire neighborhood started looking at her very differently. But to understand how Memorial Day turned into that kind of nightmare, you need to understand the kind of person Linda Harper was and why she became obsessed with my property in the first place. I moved into the neighborhood about 3 years earlier after retiring from logistics work in Colorado. The community itself looked peaceful on paper. Clean sidewalks, quiet streets. Small HOA, mostly middle-aged homeowners. The kind of place where people waved during morning walks and complained about garbage bins being left out too long. Nothing unusual. The house sat on a corner lot with a long driveway and a fenced side yard that extended farther than most properties nearby. That side yard mattered later a lot, because according to Linda, it was shared community space. According to county records, it absolutely was not. But I didn't know any of that during my first year there, honestly. I barely paid attention to the HOA at all. I paid my dues, mowed the lawn. Kept things quiet, no issues. Most neighbors were friendly enough. A retired Marine named Greg lived across the street. A young family lived next door. Everyone mostly minded their own business. Then Linda became HOA compliance chair and suddenly everything changed. Linda lived 2 houses down from me in a large gray house with decorative stone lions near the porch. You could usually tell she was outside before you even saw her because she carried clipboard almost everywhere. Not joking. Morning walks, clipboard. Community meetings, clipboard. Standing near someone else's yard while staring too long, definitely clipboard. At first she seemed overly enthusiastic but harmless. Then the violation notices started appearing. Not just for me, for everybody. One neighbor got cited because his basketball hoop was visually disruptive. Another got a warning because holiday lights stayed up 3 days too long. People complained quietly, but most paid the fines just to avoid drama. Linda seemed to enjoy that. The first notice I ever received involved a small wooden memorial display near my driveway. Every Memorial Day I placed 3 miniature American flags beside a framed photo of my father, who served in Vietnam. Nothing political. Nothing aggressive, just respectful. Linda called it non-approved lawn decor. I actually laughed when I read the letter. Then I noticed the attached fine, $75. I attended the next HOA meeting expecting it to be a misunderstanding. Instead, Linda spent almost 10 minutes talking about maintaining visual consistency. The board looked uncomfortable. One board member even quietly admitted the display probably shouldn't violate anything. But Linda kept interrupting, claiming exceptions would encourage disorder. That was the first time I realized she didn't really care about rules. She cared about control. After the meeting, I asked politely if there was an official policy banning memorial displays. She smiled in this strange way and said, "The HOA has broad authority over visible property use." That sentence stuck with me because it sounded rehearsed, like she enjoyed saying it. I paid the fine just to end the conversation. Big mistake from that point on. Linda focused on my property constantly. She measured my grass once, actually measured it. She sent warnings about trash bins, then about driveway stains, then about excessive guest parking. During a football weekend when my brother visited, every interaction felt less about rules and more personal. Still, I stayed calm. I documented everything, emails, letters, photos, dates. I figured eventually the board would realize she was overstepping. Then Memorial Day approached, and that's when Linda found her biggest target yet. Every year, our neighborhood held a small Memorial Day gathering. Nothing fancy. People grilled food, kids played games, and veterans in the area were acknowledged during a short speech near the coal-to-sack. This year, because my corner lot had the largest open driveway area, several neighbors asked if we could set up folding tables along the side of my property. I agreed immediately. We planned simple decorations, coolers, and seating, completely normal. 2 days before the event, Linda appeared at my door carrying her clipboard. She informed me that the side yard and gravel strip near my fence were restricted HOA emergency access zones. That confused me instantly because my property survey clearly showed that entire section belonged to me. I even retrieved the documents while she stood there. She barely looked at them. Instead, she said, "The HOA has historical use rights." Historical use rights? That was new. I calmly explained that neighbors had used the space before without issue. She responded by warning me that hosting the gathering there could result in enforcement action. Then she added something that genuinely bothered me. "If emergency responders need access because of your event, liability becomes serious." That felt less like concern and more like a threat. Still, the event moved forward, and for most of the afternoon, things actually felt nice. Families laughed, kids played cornhole, neighbors brought food. Even Greg, the retired Marine, gave a short speech honoring service members for a few hours. It felt like Linda's complaints might finally fade into the background. Then she showed up, clipboard in hand, walking directly toward my driveway. And the second I saw her face, I knew she wasn't there to celebrate. She was there to start something. And unfortunately, she did. Linda stopped beside the folding tables and stared at the setup like she was inspecting a crime scene. People noticed immediately. Conversations slowed down. Music kept playing softly, but the mood shifted the second she pulled a folded document from her clipboard. "This gathering is violating HOA community access regulations," she announced. Not asked, announced. A few neighbors exchanged confused looks. Greg stepped beside me quietly and muttered, "Here we go." I walked over calmly and asked what regulation she was referring to. Linda unfolded the paper dramatically and pointed toward the gravel strip running alongside my fence. "That area must remain clear for emergency vehicle access," she said loudly. I explained again that the gravel strip sat entirely inside my property line. I even offered to show her the survey map I had inside. She refused to look at it. Instead, she pointed at the tables and coolers. "You were warned already." Her voice carried across the entire gathering. Now people were openly watching. A few parents started pulling their kids.
Especially not on Memorial Day. I kept my tone even. I told her emergency vehicles could easily access the street from 3 other directions. The setup wasn't blocking anything. There wasn't even enough equipment there to justify the claim. Just folding chairs, a grill, and some tables. But Linda doubled down immediately. She said the HOA could issue emergency fines up to $500 for restricted access violations. That got everyone's attention. $500 over a cookout? It sounded ridiculous. One neighbor actually asked her if she was serious. Linda ignored him completely. Then she said something that changed the atmosphere instantly. "If authorities need to respond tonight and cannot access this area quickly, the responsibility falls on the homeowner." She looked directly at me while saying it, like she wanted everyone to associate me with danger. That bothered me more than the fine threats. Because now she wasn't just being difficult, she was trying to make neighbors nervous. I explained calmly that no official emergency designation existed for that area. The county survey proved it. The property deed proved it. And if the HOA believed otherwise, they should provide documentation. Linda smiled again. That same tight smile. "The board will review your non-compliance after the holiday." Then she took pictures. A lot of pictures. Tables, grill, driveway, fence, even the memorial display for my father. At one point, Greg asked her politely to stop photographing people's children. Linda responded by saying public community events allowed documentation. Nobody really knew how to answer that. The tension became uncomfortable fast. Some neighbors started quietly packing food containers like they expected things to escalate further. Others looked irritated at Linda more than anything else. But Linda seemed energized by the attention. That's the part people like her rarely hide. The more public the situation becomes, the more authority they think they have. About 20 minutes later, she returned with orange traffic cones. Actual traffic cones. She began placing them near the side yard entrance while announcing that she was marking restricted access zones. I walked over immediately and asked her not to place HOA materials on my property without permission. She ignored me completely, so I picked up one cone and handed it back to her, politely. No aggression, no yelling, just handing it back. And somehow that made her furious. She stepped backward dramatically and raised her voice. "Do not interfere with HOA enforcement." Several people turned fully toward us now. Phones started coming out. You could feel the entire neighborhood watching the interaction in real time. I asked again for any written proof showing emergency designation. Instead of answering, Linda said she could contact local authorities if necessary. That surprised me. Because what exactly was she planning to report? A barbecue? At that point, I honestly thought she was bluffing. Then she pulled out her phone and started making a call. Now here's the important thing. Nobody panicked immediately because most of us assumed the police would never actually respond to something this minor. But Linda spoke loudly enough for nearby neighbors to hear phrases like unsafe obstruction, restricted emergency access, potential hazard. That wording mattered later. Because suddenly this didn't sound like a simple HOA complaint anymore. It sounded serious. A mother nearby asked if there was an actual safety issue. I answered honestly, "No, there isn't." But the uncertainty had already spread. People started moving chairs. One family left entirely, and Linda stood there watching the disruption she created like she felt justified. That's when Greg finally confronted her directly, not aggressively, just firmly. He asked why she kept escalating a peaceful gathering instead of speaking privately like a normal person. Linda immediately accused him of intimidation. Greg literally laughed in disbelief. The situation was becoming surreal. And honestly, that's what made it unsettling, because nobody knew how far she intended to go. She kept repeating phrases about liability and community risk while refusing to show any actual documentation. Eventually, I told everyone to relax and continue enjoying the holiday while I handled it. Internally, though, I was starting to worry. Not because I thought I'd done anything wrong, but because people who crave control sometimes create problems just to justify their authority.